Hello, everybody. A second talk of today. As Sebastian already told you, I'm going to give this talk. I got the slides from the company, XEN, to tell you a little bit about the trial, the EPIC trial. And this is specifically with the drug that I told you about, ezogabine or reticabine. So this is the drug that acts on the channel, the KCNQ2, KCNQ3 channel, to open it more. And so it makes that, it activates the channel. So this would particularly be a treatment for children that have these loss of function variants. As I told you, the drug, ezogabine, or reticabine, it's the same drug. It has been on the market for many years for epilepsy in general, but then it was taken off the market. And XEN, as I told you, they bought a license and they developed a specific formulation that can be given to children. And they now want to specifically try it in children with KCNQ2 developmental and epileptic encephalopathy, so the severe end on the spectrum, not the benign familial neonatal seizures, due to loss of function variants. The fact that I stand here giving you this talk and not somebody from XEN, one of the reasons is also because the trial is actively recruiting patients now, but there's no site in Germany, so there's no clinic in Germany where parents or children can go to. And why is this? So they do this trial for a rare disorder. They know that there's not that many children out there. So they try to have sites all over the world, a few sites all over the world where people from everywhere can come to. And so there's all the expertise with the trial is centralized in specific sites. In Europe, I think there's somebody from the company online, so afterwards he probably can give you more information. There's surely a site in Belgium. It's in Antwerp, in the hospital where I work. In Italy, in Poland, in France. I don't know where in Italy or where in France or where in Poland. But if you live somewhere there in the neighborhoods, patients and parents can travel there and the company will reimburse all the costs for travel and hotel and stuff. So this is a way that people from Germany or some other countries where there's no site can still participate in the trial. So XEN sent me some slides. Some of the information is a little bit overlapping with what I have discussed before. So some of the slides I will go over a little bit more quickly, also to not make it too long for you, so that then at the end we can focus on what the trial is. Okay, so first of all, as I told you, KCNQ2 is a rare epilepsy, but still in the genetic epilepsies is the second most frequently mutated gene. And we saw that before. This comes from another study where I think 9,000 people with epilepsy, genetic epilepsy, got genetic testing, and 13% of them, so that's more than 10%, had a mutation in KCNQ2. So again, it's an important gene. It's a potassium channel subunit, and there's a whole spectrum of disorders, as we've seen before. So there's the benign familial neonatal epilepsy, the most benign part, and then there's KCNQ2 developmental and epileptic encephalopathy due to the loss of function variants, or the very severe loss of function variants, as we have seen. And this is the disorder or the patients that the trial is focusing on. And then, as we have also seen, there's the KCNQ2 developmental and epileptic encephalopathy due to gain of function variants. Something that I maybe didn't mention in my talk, the gain of function variants are actually more rare. So the most children with KCNQ2 related epilepsy will have a loss of function variant. And we have discussed a little bit the differences. The loss of function variants, patients, they often have very early neonatal seizures with tonic stiffening and then a little bit of clonic jerking. I mentioned the term KCNQ2, developmental and epileptic encephalopathy. It has had in literature, and maybe also your doctors, they've called it many different things. And you can find other names, KCNQ2 encephalopathy, epileptic encephalopathy, neonatal epileptic encephalopathy. They gave it numbers in the classification, but it's all the same disorder, just a different name. We now call it developmental and epileptic encephalopathy. And why is that? But because we know it's not only epilepsy, epileptic encephalopathy, but there's also a developmental problem. If you solve epilepsy, you don't solve everything. That's why the name changed a little bit over the years. Yeah, so the slides talk a little bit again. Hey, what is a disorder? As we've seen, it was described in 2012, so 10 years ago. It is more severe than the benign familial neonatal seizures. The EEG is different. You have this burst suppression pattern. And there's some neurodevelopmental problems. This slide comes from a survey that was done in, let me see, 2 years ago or something, I think during COVID, I'm not sure, by the American Patient Organization, together with Anne Berg. They did a survey among parents, like asking about different things. For example, seizures. So the children of these parents had all different ages. There were probably children that were only a few months, and others were 20 or 30 or 40 years. And you see that definitely a certain proportion of patients were seizure-free. In the survey, let's see, about 40%, but some still had seizures. So not all patients with KCNQ2 encephalopathy become seizure-free. As we have seen, if they have seizures, it's mostly these tonic seizures in the beginning, although later it can become more like spasms or seizures with shaking. But it's seizures that you can see. There's motor involvement, because some other disorders have seizures that children only stare, for example. As we have seen, many of the children respond to these sodium channel blockers, but not all children. And that's exactly these children that do not respond, these children that they're targeting with this trial. This is a slide showing that epilepsy is not the only problem. This comes from another survey where they compared what children with specific disorders, which problems that they have. And they compared, for example, Dravet syndrome with patients with mutations in KCM1B. And I'm not going to go into much details, but they looked at, do they have problems with eating, with walking, with speaking, with, let me see, vision. And in the first graph, the more problems they have, the darker the blue color. And you see in KCNQ2, the kids, they often have many of these problems. They do have walking problems, and feeding problems, and communication problems. The same in the graph below. It asks, can they use fork and spoon? And light blue is, yes, they can totally independently. A little bit darker blue, they need some supervision because they spill. Even more darker blue, you need to help the first start. And dark blue is totally, I have to feed them totally. So also here you see in KCNQ2, it's darker blue. So they have more problems compared to some other disorders. Just to show, it's not only epilepsy that's the problem. And I think many of the parents here, obviously if your child has still seizures, you want to control them. But eventually what you also really hope is that development becomes better. This is the real need nowadays for KCNQ2 encephalopathy. We already said that KCNQ2 is a rare disorder. They call that orphan diseases. Incidence, about 1 in 70,000 birds have KCNQ2 mutation, and about a third of them have the severe disorder. estimated birth incidence. These are numbers, right? 1 in every 31,000 to 57,000 children have KCNQ2, developmental and epileptic encephalopathy. You can calculate based on this how many children there should be in Germany. I don't know how many people you are, or but there's more than the people that are here, and definitely also more than the, I think, 62 families that you have in the Facebook or in the group. So definitely there's more children out there. Okay, so this brings us to the drugs. First, I mean, there's still a long way to go until the optimal drug, right? We hope we can once correct the gene defect, but the easier part to start with is to really target the channel, the protein, to make it work better. And for the loss of function variants, this is have the channel open more, be more activated. So this is again the potassium channel. This is an even more complicated but nicer figure than what I said. So this is what you see there, the action of the electrical activity of a nerve cell. When the nerve cell becomes more depolarized, so more positively charged, the sodium channels open and there's electrical currents, we call it action potentials, that start, and then the potassium current, it makes sure that it becomes less charged, it repolarized, and the sodium channels close again. So what the potassium channels do, as I said, it's a brake, they stop the continuous firing. So we hope, specifically in children with this disorder, that if we can make this brake work better, if we activate the potassium channels, that this might be a drug for these children. And ezogabine or retigabine, it was such a drug, as I told you. I already briefly mentioned this, so ezogabine was on the market, and some children with KCNQ2 developmental and epileptic encephalopathy, it's a long name, right? They have been treated with the drug, not in a trial, just because their doctor tried it. And so the company selected from all the papers that have been published, children that have tried retigabine or ezogabine when it was still available. And they particularly looked at patients with the loss of function variants, and then they looked what has been described in literature about the effect on seizures. And you can see there's a kid had daily seizures and he became seizure-free. So you have a lot of success stories. You also see at the bottom of the slide, there's some children that didn't respond. So it's not a 100% success drug, but a lot of them, seizures seem to respond to the drug. At that time, it was not a clinical trial, so they did not do neuropsychological testing or whatsoever, but they asked if the children were treated, took it, the doctor looked how the kid does, mothers and fathers, they commented on what they thought, how their kid was developing. And as you see, several parents and doctors said that the child seems to do a little bit better. He holds his head better, or she, I don't know. Visual tracking and vocalization, so he looks better, he speaks a little bit better. Of course, you never know for sure. If you didn't give the drug, maybe he also would have developed still further. But on the other hand, there's many children that seem to develop better when they took retigabine, ezogabine. But other, again, at the bottom, the black ones, those are the ones where they didn't see any change. So again, it's not a miracle drug, probably, but it seems promising, at least. This, for example, is an example of a child that has, I think, was it daily seizures? In any case, a child very young. At the left, that's the EEG at 5 months of age. He took a lot of drugs, levetiracetam, topiramate, clobazam, clonazepam. So many drugs for seizures and still continuous seizures. And then they started ezogabine, and the EEG in the middle, you see it's much more quiet. It becomes better. The seizures, let me see, they decreased. And when they lowered the drug dose, that's the third EEG, activity in the brain became, again, a little bit more hyperexcitable. So there seems to be a relation between the drug dose and how well the seizures responded. So at least in this child, it seemed to work. But as I said, it was taken off the market, so it's not available anymore. We know there's many children that still have seizures. There is this question, hey, maybe it also works for development. So there was many people in the world thought that it was really a high need to have a drug available for KCNQ2 related disorders. So that's why Xenon started this trial. They made a different formulation for little children. They did all the paperwork to get approval. They got, and this is the last sentence there, they got a fast track designation, an orphan drug designation. What does it mean? I don't know all the details, but if you develop drugs for rare disorders and you can prove to the government, I want to say, but FDA and the EMI, those are these European and American bodies that control medicine trials, etc. They get permission, if they prove that there's really a need for this drug, they can develop it and bring it to the market quicker. And they, of course, had the advantage that ezogabine, it was already used in the past in people, and they know it was a fairly safe drug. So that's why they started this trial, the EPIC trial it's called, and it started, I think, almost a year ago in sites in the US. So there's already for a year American children that can enter the trial. Oh, wait, I was here, right? Yeah. And then since half year or something, European sites are opening. I don't know all the details, but as I told you, at least in Antwerp, I think we started June or something last year. Time flies, right? Maybe it was March or April or May with the first inclusions. And I think we were the first site in Europe. And then in the meantime, there's sites in Italy, in France, in Poland, maybe in other countries. But those are the most important ones that I know of. So this is a little bit how the trial looks like. So when your child is agreed that he can enter the trial, and I'll go to some of the criteria that they have to meet before they can enter. There's first a 2 to 4 weeks base, they call it screening, baseline. So they look how many seizures does your child have now, and how is he doing generally, and then they start the actual treatment. And then in any trial, they randomize. And what does it mean? Some children will get the drug, and some children will get a placebo. The doctor doesn't know what you're taking, you or your parents don't know what they're taking, and then they compare. So during, I think, 24 days, they increase the dose, and then for, I have to check, 12 weeks, they stay on the same dose, or the children have to stay on the same dose. And they check how many seizures does the child have, does the drug have any effect or not. And then the trial stops. And then, and this is, I think, also important, there's an open label extension study. And what does this mean? This means that the actual trial is finished, but whoever wants can then move over to the active drug. So you know you're taking the drug. And then you can continue this. And also during this time, they will follow you up. So that they will collect data to see how is the child doing, how is the seizures doing, how is the neurodevelopment doing. So I think this is a good thing because there's some studies when the trial is over, it's finished. You go off the drug and then they look at the data and then they see whether it's effective. But here you can really, you're sure you can enter in the follow-up trial where you know you take the drug. But you can also choose to stop, that's also an option. You don't have to. So there's a whole list of inclusion criteria. So once you decide, hey, I want to see if I can enter, you go to the trial site and they will go to a whole list of documents. But these are the most important ones. So it's for children between 1 month to 6 years. So older children cannot enter, more than 3 kilo. You have to have proven KCNQ2 developmental and epileptic encephalopathy due to a loss of function variant. You have to have had seizures with an onset in the first 2 weeks. And why is that? Because we know if it's later, it's often a gain of function variant. It's only for children that still have active seizures. So children that don't have any seizures anymore can at this stage not enter the trial. And this is, at one hand, it's a pity, right? Because there's still a lot of children that don't have seizures anymore, but their development is not good, and we hope, we're not sure, but we hope that this drug could make a difference. But it's much more difficult to measure whether the development is better or not. So they choose to go for something easy. You can easily see, yeah, do the seizures go away or not? And they hope to be able to sell the drug quicker. Shall we have questions afterwards? It's almost finished, I think. It's not that many slides. What would I say? Oh yeah, but they will, during the trial, collect some data on development. Some. They don't sell it as that they want to prove it as an effect, but they will collect the data, also in this open label extension study. What else? Oh, they can have other drugs, between one of other drugs they can take at the same time, but during the study, that is for all studies, you cannot change these other drugs, because otherwise you don't know if you see an effect. Is it because of retigabine or the study drug, or is it because of the change in the other drugs? Yeah, those are the main inclusion criteria. And there's some exclusion criteria. I don't know by head, but I think they can't have too much of liver disease or renal disease or these kind of things. So what do they do during the study? Parents will have to put in a diary whether they see a seizure or not. You have to calculate seizures. Sometimes there's telephone visits. They have to tell the study nurse, how is my kid going? Sometimes you have to go to the hospital with the kids. They will have to do some testing. And they will ask parents, how do they do some checklists and questionnaires? How is the kid improved, yes or not? How is quality of life? They will look at sleep quality, as you see. And they do some scales of neurodevelopment. For example, this Bailey scale. Oh, it's a touch screen. I didn't know that. Sorry. It's yeah. I'm okay. I have the old thing. This Bailey scale, it's really a test for cognitive development. So they will look at it. They also look at the safety. So when the children will have to go to the hospital now and then to just do a routine neurological exam. Remember, ezogabine, when it was on the market, when it was available, some patients had problem with urinary retention, especially the very high doses. So they will monitor this, and if this is the case, then you will have to lower the dose. They look at cardiac safety, and they will look at this blue discoloration that has been described in a few patients that took the drug in the past. So I think this is a little bit, yes, the description of the study. I understand there's somebody from the company online to take questions. And I had to say, if people have questions, there's this email that you see there, where you can contact the company to ask, what is the closest site? What should I do? Is my child able to enter? To see what is possible. Any questions for me? If I think, is he, or is there a screen? Oh, okay, there. So this is, was it Carlo or Carlos? I don't remember. Yes, Frank saying.
Carlo.
Carlo, okay.
First of all, thank you, Dr. Wekhuizen, for the excellent overview of that big study.
No problem.
Good day, my name is Carlo Mendoza. I'm an employee at Xenon Pharmaceuticals. I am joining you from Toronto, Canada. It is a pleasure for me to join you today. Please note that I'm not a doctor. I am a project manager for the EPIC study that Dr. Wekhuizen just described. As a project manager, my goal is to guide you to specific resources to answer questions that I may be unable to answer for you today in this setting. Unfortunately, I'm not fluent in German, and therefore I will require some assistance in translations. Thank you. If there are any questions, please feel free to ask away.
I think indeed that you can ask a question in German and then we will translate, right?
Also wenn jemand Fragen hat, wir müssen jetzt das Mikrofon benutzen, weil sonst der Herr Mendoza, der Herr Carlo, das nicht versteht. Also wenn einer eine Frage hat, sagt Bescheid, ich komme zu euch und dann versuchen wir das zu machen. Auf Deutsch oder auf Englisch? Kannst du auf Englisch.
Okay, hello. So will there also be a treatment for gain of function? Or because you described it, it's only for loss of function?
For our particular trial, the focus is on enrolling patients with only a loss of function at the moment.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Also nur noch mal zur Wiederholung. Zuerst wird jetzt drauf geguckt für diese Lose-of-Function-Funktion, nicht für die Gain-of-Function-Funktion. Wo? Handheben?
Is there already a date when the medication will be on the market, or?
No, there is not. At the moment, we are still enrolling patients for this important EPIC study. Once we have enrolled our subjects, we'll perform an analysis of the data and we will submit the data to the authorities that Dr. Wekhuizen has described, the FDA, the European Medicines Agency. And if they agree with us that the data is robust and suggest that the medication is effective in this population, then we would expect that they would allow us to market the medication. But unfortunately, that is still many years away as we are still in the middle of enrolling the patients to collect the data for the study.
What would be your expectation regarding the time frame to get the medicine on the market?
Oh, my goodness, that is very difficult to answer because this is a rare condition. We don't have very good understanding of how quickly patients will present to our sites and consent to the trial. At the very least, I believe that we're looking at 3, 4, 5-year time frame.
Weitere Fragen? So I can see right now we don't have any more questions. Maybe the questions will come tonight when we sit together and we'll talk about that for us in German. And so, Mr. Mendoza, I will thank you right now that you step into this. I think in Toronto you have it 8 o'clock in the morning. Is that right? Thanks
9
for that.
o'clock.
Thanks for the early bird.
You're welcome.
And I think the rest we will talk to Sarah right now, and maybe the questions we have later we can send them per mail, or if we have parents or kids that will join the clinical trial, that maybe the questions will come later.
Certainly, I would encourage everyone to direct their questions or comments to the xenoncares@xenonpharma.com email. They will be addressed very promptly by our colleagues in medical affairs who will be able to speak openly about whether or not their child is eligible for the trial. And if there are any specific questions about participating in the study, then we would direct you to a nearby clinical investigator who could provide more details.
Thank you, Mr. Mendoza. Thank you for XEN that you support research for medication for KCNQ2. That's a big support for a lot of families here in Europe and in the US. We wish you all the best, that you will find a solution for that rare disease. And I think when families can help with like their their support from here, they will do it, and I think that's all we can do. And you do the best, and that's maybe
Yes.
we find a solution. Thank you for that.
It's been my pleasure. Please enjoy the rest of your day.